Hello and welcome everybody to episode 65 of Comic DNA. In this episode we are discussing Flash Time Flies by John Rozum and Seth Fisher. And I am joined today by a good friend of mine, somebody who I've not had on this show, even though we've been talking for a while about doing this episode. And we're finally getting around to doing it. I am very happy to welcome Carlos Gabriel... Oh wait, I already forgot how to pronounce your name. Ruiz. Carlos Gabriel Ruiz.
Happens all the time.
Did I do that correctly?
Yeah, that's right.
All right, Carlos. Well, thank you for doing this. I guess I asked you before how I wanted to introduce you, and you just ticked off like an all of the above: comic book writer, artist, creator, publisher. You name it, Carlos has done it.
That's about right. Yeah. So I've been writing and illustrating my own stuff since pretty much since I graduated college, and even in college I did a comic strip for a student newspaper for 3 years, and so did that, and worked in Playback magazine doing a pretentious record store guy, which eventually I self-published as a 3-issue miniseries and put out as a trade. Started Ink and Drink Comics when I was a editor for the Playback site, the graphic ink section, and we put out all the web comics once a week. Kind of started a sketch group from that where we get together and talk about comics and sort of pitch what we were working on, and then from that it expanded from about 7 people to about 13, and then it became officially became Ink and Drink Comics in 2010. And we've published 16 books since then and 6 mini comics. And then on my own, with my own imprint, Brain Cloud Comics, I have about a dozen or so comics, and a few newer releases are Weatherman, which is a 5-issue miniseries, which I'm writing and illustrating, and Brandon Daniels is coloring, and then Iron Age, which is about the rise and fall of the Lemp family, that I'm writing and lettering, and then Jim Mosley's doing the illustration work for, and Brandon Daniels is also coloring as well. So those are some of the, I guess, my latest projects.
Yeah. So you keep yourself busy with comics. Like myself, I can never seem to run out of projects to be working on.
That's true. I got 2 in the hopper. One miniseries that I'm working on with Brian Atkins called Blood on the Tracks, which I'm actively pitching and to a couple comic book companies. So we have 2 issues done on that one, and we're waiting to get 3 before we actually solicit it, whether it's with a comic book company or as a Kickstarter. And then working on those 2 miniseries, like I said, and then putting the wraps on the latest Ink and Drink anthology, the science fiction book Wasted. And that should come out October 14th at St. Louis Small Press Expo.
All right. Yeah, the Ink and Drink, I think that's largely how we know each other. I think we might have actually first met at Planet Comic-Con. I can't remember if it was that or one of the Ink and Drink meetings.
No, I believe we met in Kansas City, right?
Planet Comic-Con in Kansas City. That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, but, and then I kind of I saw that you were from St. Louis, and then I think we struck up a conversation, and then we met at a couple local shows,
right?
And then I guess our kind of comic friendship grew since then. So.
I don't get to make it out to enough of the Ink and Drink meetings. I'm a horrible shut-in, and it's tough for me to get out and meet other creators. But we did have Steve Higgins do an episode with me, also from Ink and Drink, and we talked a little bit about it then. But I still haven't gotten Jason to do an episode. Jason Green, the other editor. But all good guys, all good St. Louis guys, of course.
Yeah, I was personally hurt and offended that you had Steve on before me. So glad at least we got to rectify that and came on. But you know what, that Ink and Drink. The Ink and Drink bubble's been burst already. So, but yeah, so it's actually one of the things that's great about Ink and Drinks is it did start off as a way for everyone to get out and socialize and meet people who are doing comics, because I've always heard that there's like a thriving St. Louis comic scene, and there is.
Mm-hmm.
For the longest time, I didn't know where it was at. You have all these guys who are making comics professionally in St. Louis, whether that's Brian Hurd and Matt Kent,
Mm-hmm.
and that Cullen Bunn and that crew.
Yeah.
And they've been doing it for a while. So like you always heard like all these, there's a lot of talent in St. Louis, and so when we started Ink and Drink, it was sort of our way to sort of start our own scene and have people come together. So it's been a pretty rip-roaring success, because we were just going to publish one anthology. We publish genre anthologies. For those who, I guess I should explain a little bit. For those who don't know, Ink and Drink Comics publishes genre anthologies every 6 months,
Mm-hmm.
and so we serve all the different genres. And so our newest one is science fiction, but we've published the entire gamut, starting with horror with our first anthology, Spirits of St. Louis. And we've every 6 months we've done a new one, and because they've been successful and we've grown, we've kept going. And so in all, I want to say that we've had over 150 different contributors, creators who've contributed to our anthologies in the last 7 years since we've started in 2010.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's pretty amazing just to have all these people contributing. And I don't really know necessarily everyone who's contributed a story. Sometimes it's a friend of a friend. If you're a writer, you could bring your artist friend and they can contribute. And so it's grown, and it's been a really cool thing to see happen. And each book has just been better and better, and we're still thrilled to be doing it, and that's why we're still doing it after 7 years.
I am impressed that you guys have maintained that schedule. 2 books a year, and big anthology books. I mean, that's and you've been consistent with that. That's crazy that you've been able to put out that many books. Not to mention like the mini comics that you've also done.
Yeah, and not only that, but I mean, a lot of people who contributed to Ink and Drink have gone on to big successes.
Mm-hmm.
Like Marie Anger, one of her first published stories was in an Ink and Drink anthology, and now she's lettering and coloring. I think lettering some of Matt Kent stuff, and she's coloring a new Cullen Bunn, and she did Adventure Time comics that she wrote and illustrated herself.
Yeah.
And Christina Steen Stewart, one of her first published book was a story in one of our Ink and Drink anthologies. Now she has a graphic novel called Archival Ink, I believe, coming out, or Archival Quality, coming out from IDW next year.
Oh, cool.
So it's like, and then we've had Braden Daniels, who I've worked with and has colored a lot of my stuff. He's coloring stuff, flatting stuff and coloring stuff for Image and Marvel and a few other people. So I mean, we've had a lot of successes, so it's good. It's great to see that local scene blow up and hit the national level.
Yeah, that is exciting to be able to kind of watch it happen, But it was, I think it was actually at one of the Ink and Drink meetings, one of the few that I managed to make it out to, and you and I were chatting, and we were just talking about comics. I think in general, I can't even remember, conversations go just talking about comics, and the subject came up. We were talking about Seth Fisher, who is an incredible artist, or I should say was an incredible artist, taken from us too soon.
Way too soon. And he's actually one of my favorite artists. But it's also like it's tough to talk about him without talking about the tragedy, because right when I was getting into Seth Fisher was right when he died, and it's a peculiar thing, because I feel like he's an artist he had a few really great books under his belt, but they never were really huge mainstream successes, and as a result, it seems like not many people really know Seth Fisher or know his art. So whenever I meet somebody else who really likes Seth Fisher or even knows who Seth Fisher is, I have to do nothing but just talk about how much I love Seth Fisher. And I'm 100% with you. I agree. Like I remember I was in college and I was digging through the dollar bins at my comic book shop, and I saw Happy Dale, Devils in the Desert, and I was like, "What's this?" And I was just kind of taken aback by the art, because it reminded me, like, one part Jeff Darrow meets like Where's Waldo,
Yeah.
and just super intricate line art with this crazy perspective and hyper detail, and just telling this amazing story. You were like, that is a cartoonist right there.
Yeah.
And I didn't know who it was, and I saw that it was colored by Laura Allred, and I'm a huge fan of the Allreds, and I love Mad Men. Mad Men was one of my favorite comics when I was in college, and so it was in the dog bin, so I picked up the I think first 3 issues of the miniseries, first 2 issues of the miniseries, sorry, and loved it. And then I think next thing I saw his name on was Green Lantern Will World, and that graphic novel by J.M. DeMatteis. And man, that is just if an artist was meant for a book, it's just the imagination of Seth Fisher drawing the crazy machinations of the Green Lantern ring, and that book was just amazing.
Yeah, it's a real trip. I think that's one of the things that makes Seth Fisher's art so interesting is that it's really, you could say it's psychedelic, like it's really imaginative and really bizarre, but it's not psychedelic in the way that a lot of what you would consider underground comics to be. Like, it's still really clean, and he still has these really sharp lines.
Yeah.
So it's really readable.
It's very readable. It's almost like Mobius.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Yeah.
Yeah, if you look at some of these like Incal stuff, it's like it's in the future and it's this crazy dream world, and and no one could draw that dream world. Like if you're a writer and you want an artist to do it, good luck, because 9 times out of 10, you're not going to get what you have in your head. But then when you look at what Seth Fisher would do with these books, this world was just intimately like lived in, and there was just all these hidden gags going on in the panel, just all these stories that are evolving in front of you that you got to almost delve over the page and just dive into it and take your time with, because there's so much going on and there's so much story in there, and he just has so many hidden Easter eggs within those panels. It's just really amazing work. And I hesitate to ask anybody who appreciates comics and cartooning and to look at his page and just not instantly become a fan.
Yeah, no, I agree. I can see why it would not necessarily take off in a mainstream comic. Like, I personally would have loved to have seen Seth Fisher drawing like a weirdo X-Men book. I think that's the one thing that we would have eventually got as he sort of got moved around from property to property. Because I like, there were people that liked him, and I think he was finding real work in the comic book industry, and he was going to keep rising. I think that's part of the tragedy. It's like really hard to talk about Seth Fisher just because it was, as we said, too soon. But
yeah, and I mean,
yeah.
You haven't. I mean, you did mention that he died pretty early, but he was at a party in Japan because he was living in Japan.
Yeah,
and he fell off the side of the building. It was like
it was a roof party, and that's very unfortunate.
It's just crazy because I don't know. I remember, so I met Mike Allred at a con one time, and Laura Allred was there, and while I was in line, I was just kind of chatting with her, and I told her that I loved all her coloring work, and I remember, and I told her that she's the reason I knew who Seth Fisher was, because of Happy Dale in the Valley. Like, I picked it up because I saw her name on there, and then I saw the artwork, and I was like, it's cool, and I picked it up, and she's like, yeah, he's really hard to cover because there's so much going on,
right?
And I can just imagine that, because there literally is so much going on in all those panels. I mean, I'm sure that it's a tough gig for a colorist when you have that much open lines with that much detail, but it was great. So.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about the book itself, Flash Time Flies. One of the things that I've always kind of liked about DC Comics, I don't know where you are in this. I have to admit, growing up, I've always been a little bit more of a Marvel reader than a DC reader.
I agree.
Yeah? Okay. Well, I definitely was more of a Marvel reader. I had a certain appreciation for the DC characters, but I never really got into their books. But one of the things that I always liked about DC, and this was definitely something that picked up a lot of steam, I think, in the 90s and more so even in the 2000s, was that they would do these little prestige graphic novels. DC was more open to just doing like a standalone story, and it wouldn't necessarily just have to be something specifically tied to continuity, the way Marvel was. So you would have DC doing their Elseworlds books, or just like weird graphic novels just about the characters in whatever settings they wanted. And you would get like these books that Seth Fisher was doing, like you mentioned, the Green Lantern, Will World, and this Flash book. And I really appreciate that, because I like being able to just read a complete story about a character without it necessarily being tied to a specific point in continuity history for the company. And I think that's what this book is.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I can count pretty much on one hand the number of Flash books I picked up prior to this, and it's just for whatever reason, Flash was never really a character that resonated with me. I mean, I like the concept of it, but
right.
He a guy runs fast and can do a bunch of cool stuff. But I was never really into that world. And I agree with you. Like I was more of a Marvel guy. I grew up in the 90s, late 80s, early 90s, and loved Spider-Man, X-Men. Even like one of my obscure favorite characters is the Black Knight, and I love the Avengers.
Yeah.
So DC. I mean, I love Superman and Batman, but besides the big two, I wasn't really familiar with a lot of the other characters. So, at least growing up.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the things that makes this book strong, it's a pretty light on the story, but I think it sort of hits a lot of the highlights of the fun things that can be done with Flash. I mean, I guess a very basic plot synopsis is in the story. At some point in the 50s, during fighter jet pilot tests, a time anomaly happens and a jet fighter pilot gets launched into the future. And so Flash has to go to the future because he has that power, he has that ability on his, his time treadmill?
His cosmic treadmill.
Cosmic treadmill, right. Which is one of those concepts that, I mean, they even sort of have to make like an ironic joke about it. But
yeah, that was great.
Yeah, that's the kind of thing though that I love. Like, I love ridiculous stuff in superhero comics. Like, I love that Flash would have a cosmic treadmill,
And I love the fact that he acknowledges it as he's explaining to the character how he made it to the future.
Right.
He's like, I had to take the cosmic treadmill, and he's like, yeah, it's a long story. Sounds stupid, but
sounds
it's true.
Stupid when you say it out loud.
Yeah, it sounds stupid when I say it out loud. Yeah.
But yeah, so he goes to the future, and it's a future that he's never been to, and everything is just bizarre and weird. It truly is an alien world, like it's an alien future. This is where, of course, Seth Fisher's art shines through. And the story is pretty simple. The fighter pilot emerges like outside of the Speed Force. Like there's the whole thing of the Speed Force, which is part of Flash's powers, like part of his story, the mythos of the character is what I'm just getting at. So the test pilot pops out in the future, and there's a basic cosmic danger that the Flash has to grab him and put him back in the timeline where he's supposed to be. Otherwise, it's going to cause time to keep accelerating too fast until it eventually the end of the universe happens before it's supposed to happen, and then it's going to ripple effect back in time and destroy everything. It's completely ridiculous, but it's one of those things that just works in the context of the story. It's simple and it's almost fun in a way.
Yeah, I love how the story essentially takes three or four pages just to introduce the concept of it. It's like there's this fighter pilot, and that he was trying to break the speed barrier. It kind of goes into a little bit of a post-World War II America, and how like the fighter pilots were these heroes, and this guy broke the speed barrier but caused an accident, and sending him flying through time, causing the rift. And then it was around that time that people started saying, hey, you notice that time feels like it's speeding up, it's going faster.
Yeah.
what used to be like a day is now turns into a week, and the entire weekend's gone, and people have these conversations like, where did the weekend go?
Right.
It became more and more happened, and before you knew it, everyone was in boom the future, and then it kind of like flash in this like mega city of the future. That's this alien city, and he's just running around trying to find this fighter pilot who, a page earlier, you can literally see the rip in time and see him being ejected from his pilot from his chair, flight chair, speeding through time. It's pretty incredible, and just like the details of that illustration are just amazing. And but yeah, so you get there, boom, and then on page 5 you're in the future, and all the entire premise is set up for you, and you're good to go on this like rip roaring run as the Flash tries to stop this guy. And it's pretty incredible.
It is a nice little. Like I said, I think it's pretty light on the story. We haven't really talked a whole lot about John Rozum. I think that we're going to largely be talking about Seth Fisher here, but I do think, despite me saying that it's light on the story, I do appreciate how poetic it is. Like as you said, it really ties the whole, what would you call that? Like the idiom, that thing. People always reference, like, I can't believe, time flies when you're having fun. The whole concept of how we have like phrases to describe how time gets away from you, and it's not literal. It's it's metaphors or idioms, like I said. But in the context of the story, it's really poetic in how that actually is becoming literal. Like the reason that we say things like, where did the weekend go? And it seems like time's always moving faster, because in the context of the story it actually is. As things go on, time is moving faster. So I thought that was it's a little cute. It's a little not really kitschy, but it's a nice, simple, poetic way to kind of just set up the story to just like get you there into the future.
Yeah, definitely. And then the whole premise is Flash in the future running against time to stop this guy who's essentially, I think Flash establishes that this guy's actually faster than him, and so Flash is trying to catch up with him. And for the first time in his life, Flash isn't the fastest man in the world, and he's trying to catch up with this guy who's this fighter pilot who's essentially racing through time to the end of the world, because he doesn't want to be alive anymore. Essentially, he's like running to the time so he could stop what's happening to himself, essentially kill himself.
Right.
And so Flash is trying to catch up with this guy and stop him from essentially killing himself and ending the entire world. So it's kind of interesting, especially when you look at time, all the time that people have, and what to do with it. And Flash, I think if you look at some of the like the newest X-Men movies, like Days of Future Past, when we see Quicksilver and sort of the bullet time where Quicksilver's running around and doing all these, moving the bullets and disassembling guns and all that. If you look at Flash Time Flies, that is exactly what Seth Fisher's doing as Flash is running around. And so the first time I saw X-Men Days of Future Past and that scene with Quicksilver, which was amazing, I immediately recalled the Flash Time Flies and how Seth Fisher would sort of display all that,
Yeah, he does draw the same thing. Like it's interesting to see a Flash book where it's very interesting to compare this. The other books that I've been reading on this podcast with my friend Alex, we've been reading the old Stan Lee and Jack Kirby X-Men issues, and Quicksilver is one of the big characters in those issues. And the way Jack Kirby always drew Quicksilver, showing that he was moving fast, was he'd always have like the speed lines, or the figure would be blurred out in some way to show that that's his power in action. And it's really interesting to read a Flash book where it really is just static figures. There's not a lot of like blurred effects to try to make it look like he's moving fast. There are a few panels where it shows like a Doppler effect, where you see like a faded echo of the character as he's moving through the scene.
Yeah.
But it's still really clear lines, and it's a lot of that, like everybody's kind of frozen in one space while the Flash is just constantly just here, then he's there, then he's there, and yeah, it's contrary to I think the way a lot of people draw the Flash or depict him.
Yeah, because I mean, Flash is essentially moving in his own time,
Mm-hmm.
and everyone else is moving. They're standing still, but essentially they're actually not standing still. They're actually moving, but they're just moving.
They're just moving so slowly in comparison. Yeah.
Yeah, you can't see. So yeah, it's interesting to see how they're going to do the Flash in the new Justice League movie, because it seems like they're doing some of those things, but it seems like they are almost fast following the X-Men and the actually in how they have the treatment there. So.
Yeah, it will be interesting to see how they do that, because as you said, the Quicksilver scene in Days of Future Past was so successful. Like, when that movie came out, I remember that's all anybody was talking about, was that scene in particular, because it was a cool scene, and it was, I mean, I'm a big fan of Jim Croce, so I really liked seeing the Jim Croce music. It was ironic and funny and perfect and beautiful.
Yeah, no, it was amazing how he had to listen to this, Jim
like
Croce
slow, mellow music.
Slow music to kind of calm him down while he's running about doing this.
It was great.
Yeah, I mean, I think the X-Men, kind of side note.
Yeah,
X2 with Nightcrawler and how he pops out, that opening scene is one of the best scenes in any comic book movie around. And then that Quicksilver scene where he busts out Magneto is also, definitely up there. And so, the X-Men are responsible, I guess Bryan Singer responsible for two of the best mutant scenes or two of the best superhero scenes around.
On film, yeah, for sure.
So, yeah.
So one thing I was thinking when reading this book, The Flash, is or Time Flies specifically, I should say. I mean, I would say, obviously, the way we've been talking about it, this is definitely a more art-driven comic book. I think you would agree with me in saying that.
Sure.
No, I always find it interesting to kind of look at, because comics really, there's so many different styles of comics, and there's some, like, I think a lot of times, a lot of mainstream or I should say modern Marvel and DC comics are very writer focused. Like, the focus is more on the writing and less on the art. And this book almost feels like, I don't want to say antiquated, but it almost feels different from reading a lot of comics you would read from DC today, because it's so focused on the art, which almost feels like, like almost a bygone era at this point.
Yeah. I mean, the story, like you said, it's not that the story's like super light, but it's like there's a premise. You kind of go. You have sort of some of the, I guess, some of the people helping Flash out in the future, who essentially kind of like time cops, essentially.
Yeah.
And they were trying to make sure that the order is restored and that the time anomaly is fixed, and so they help Flash out by making him this suit made out of nanobots or something that essentially vibrate with him.
Yeah.
Because his clothes are going to melt in this future, and then they give him some nose plugs that essentially allow him to breathe in this new breathe the air in this new world. If not, like, his lungs would burn. And so yeah, but then it's pretty much go, and then it's like Flash trying to find this guy. And like, I think on page 40 there was like 10 panels or 12 panels.
I was looking at the panel count.
Yeah, all these like little tiny panels that show Flash disassembling this gun and just like the minutia of it. And so again, in the background, the person holding the gun, their expression doesn't change until like the very end, where they look up and then the gun pieces and falls on the floor.
Yeah.
It's pretty amazing. And yeah, I mean, with Seth Fisher, I think you almost, because there's so much on the page and there's so much, I guess, going on, you almost have to just like let him shine. If the story had nothing but narration, captions, and dialogue buttons that would just step all over the art, I don't think it'd be the same. Definitely worth reading, I would say.
I think another thing that I like about it, as I had said about having these standalone graphic novels, I think it's also important to realize that it's only a 48-page story. Like, it's basically just like a prestige-sized issue, like a double-sized comic book issue, and it's not very decompressed in its storytelling. Like, it's a pretty compact story. Like, it's like we're talking. I was saying how it's kind of light, but it's not like nothing happens. A lot happens, but it's just it almost moves at a very fast pace, if you will. But I mean, it's the Flash, so it sort of makes sense that it moves like that.
Yeah,
but yeah. Oh, go ahead.
It's all no. I was gonna say it's all killer, no filler.
Yeah.
I mean, here's it goes. Boom, 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 and hit all the beats. It's pretty quick paced. There's a lot of time for the art to shine. But I think you're almost at page 40, and you're not quite at the end yet. There's still stuff happening, still stuff that needs to be resolved, and then it all kind of wraps itself up. So it's pretty interesting, the speed at which they did. I mean, and it is a fairly quick read, on initial. You don't want to. I would recommend taking the time to just savor all the pages, because there is so much beauty going on in those pages, that the pages themselves really are a work of art. And if you just speed through it, then you're going to be missing a lot. But it is a quick read.
Yeah, but again, it's there's still a lot of text on some of these pages, but I really like the page layouts and how just diverse they are, right? Like the panels, a lot of the pages, they don't look similar. Like there's really diverse layouts from all the pages, or across the book, I should say.
Yeah.
And so yeah, it's just a really good looking book. It's what I want comics to be,
It is, and the way that he creates those pages, it's really dynamic. Yes. And there isn't a lot left where you're just, I guess, wanting on the page. I mean, he takes full use of the page and page construction when he's doing his panels, and I mean, they really shine. Like, there's, if you're a beginning artist and you want to take a look at, how to make dynamic sequential art, you should really look at Seth Fisher's work and just see how he tells the stories, because there's no better starting point. He's pretty much as good as it gets.
Yeah,
I think.
I would agree. He really was a true master at page layouts. So you've read everything that Seth Fisher has done, or most everything, would you say?
Most everything. So then I think I read. I guess he did the Tokyo Pop, or Vertigo Tokyo Pop, with Jonathan Bankin, that came out it was a Vertigo book. They had they had a Vertigo Pop London, which I want to say Philip Bond did, which was pretty cool. Okay. But then Tokyo Pop or Vertigo Pop Tokyo with Jonathan Bankin is what Seth did, and it's sort of about this American student, or he's visiting Japan. I don't really remember what, but it's super cool. And in that one, he sort of has more of a cartoony style, and really after Will World and Flash, he starts moving a little bit more to that cartoony style. So that when he did Fantastic Four, Iron Man, Big and it's a little bit more exaggerated, and it's not quite as refined. It's a little more cartoony.
Yeah.
But Fantastic Four, Big in Japan, to be honest, I mean, it looks phenomenal. The Iron Man meets the Fantastic Four. They're in Japan. They fight a bunch of monsters.
Yeah.
It's cool. And I don't think the story's that great. But then his Batman, Snow, which I think was the first time that I remember seeing J.H. Williams write something. J.H. Williams III, he wrote that. Yeah. Or was a co-writer with, I think, someone else. But that book is amazing. It tells the story of Mr. Freeze and sort of the tragedy of it, which I think the Batman the Animated Series, that's a high watermark for a Mr. Freeze book.
Oh, for sure,
yeah. Snow is definitely, if that's one. 1A, then this is 1B.
Okay, yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah, I noticed that too. I was gonna mention that about his style. Like his figures in this book, like you can see obviously the imagination just oozing across the page, but his figures are pretty. I don't necessarily want to call them static, but like the poses are definitely. He's going for a more realistic figure poses. And
Yeah.
I think that you can see that in the stuff that he did after this. He started to loosen up with his figures, which I think really complements the just the overall like psychedelic tone that he was going for. I mean, I don't necessarily want to use the term psychedelic, but you get what I mean.
Yeah, definitely. And it almost seems like if you look at some of his earlier stuff, sort of as a, like I said, Jeff Darrow,
Mm-hmm.
and quietly-ish influence.
Yeah, I see a lot of that in there. Yeah.
Yeah, and like some of the way that the faces are, the realistic portrayal of superheroes in costumes is sort of like more along the lines of a way Frank Quietly would do.
Mm-hmm.
Towards like Fantastic Four, big in Japan, and like Snow, it's almost like more Mobius, where it's got that real clean European line look, but then also a little bit more cartoony and a little bit more exaggerated poses, like the big noses,
Yeah.
kind of exaggerated arms, body types,
Mm-hmm.
a little stretched out, and you can see sort of that evolution from the early ones to the Batman Legends of the Dark Knight Snow.
Yeah. That's like a comic book style that it's probably my favorite, which is to say, I think it bothers me that you don't see a lot of comic book artists doing this, and we might be getting off on a little bit of a tangent, but it bothers me that you don't see too many comic book artists doing it these days. Is that style of having really clean, realistic looking world, clean lines, full backgrounds, but with a lot of cartooning in the characters. So the people look a little cartoonish in their designs, but it's still like a very very real world that they inhabit. And it's the kind of art style that I think that you saw in Will Eisner, who's one of the guys that practically created modern comic books. And you see that in a lot of European comics, the way a lot of their artists draw things, and I think you see that in a lot of Japanese manga too, where there's a lot of focus on the architecture and making it look very hyper realized, but then the figures, the characters, themselves are really cartoony, in their designs.
Yeah, and I think that he was living in Japan for, I think, the last 4 years of his life,
Mm-hmm.
and it sort of coincides. I think when he did Vertigo Pop Tokyo, he moved to Japan and was like studying. I guess I don't know if his girlfriend moved out there or whatever, but he went out there with her.
Mm-hmm.
He started getting more of that manga influence on him, and you could kind of see it in his work.
Yeah, I think so.
And yeah, but I mean, it's cool. It's definitely unique, and you don't really see a lot of people sort of mimic it. I mean, the only person I can even think of who recently reminded me of him was, and just a little bit in like the way that he drew his figures and backgrounds, and the way that he had his characters sort of inhabit their costumes and their clothing. And that was, I want to say Adrian Alfonso, the one who did Adrian. I want to say Alfano.
Mm-hmm.
He did Runaways.
Okay.
With Brian K. Vaughan.
Brian K. Vaughan, yes. Yeah, I can see that. I haven't read that in a long time. You're talking about like the original like Runaway series that Brian K. Vaughan did, right?
Yeah, he did the original, I guess, 24 issues of Runaways and then left. And then I think back recently did Mrs. Marvel with G. Willow Wilson, and actually his artwork has evolved now, so it's now again even more cartoony than it was initially.
Mm-hmm. Yes, no, I know exactly what you're talking about, and yes, I agree. That's very much his strength. He can deliver that, and I just wish more people would do that.
Yeah, I mean, when it's done well, like those guys, it looks amazing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, I don't know if I have too much else to say about Time Flies. I think, I mean, This not means much coming from somebody who's largely a Marvel reader and probably only owns like 3 Flash comic books, but this might be my favorite Flash comic book ever made.
Yeah, I agree. I've heard good things about Mark Waid and Grant Morrison's Flash, but to be honest, I really haven't read too much. I think I picked up a couple issues and I thought it was cool, but it wasn't my thing.
Mm-hmm.
It was rooted a lot in the history of the character, and because I didn't really know a lot about the history of the character and like Flash's villains and his sort of rogues gallery, I never got into it. But this book is great, and it sort of says all you need to know about Flash. He runs fast. He tries to stop crime. He has a cosmic treadmill, and he's just really kind of a good guy.
Well, I like too I guess now I do have something else to say about this book. Is that I do like the focus on the challenge, the thing that Flash has to do to save the day, which is to catch this guy so that he can help him. And it's not just a hero versus villain thing where Flash just has to find a guy and beat him up. And he kind of makes a joke about that, about like how easy it is for Superman and Batman when they're doing stuff, because they just have to, just find the guy and punch him a bunch of times. But Flash has to deal with a little bit more complex problems. I really just appreciate that too from a storytelling point of view.
Yeah, for sure. It looks like Flash knows his place in the DC universe with his sort of meta commentary on it.
Yeah, exactly. There's a little bit of some meta jokes here and there throughout this book. Yeah, it's a fun book.
Yeah, and I guess to talk about the ending, right?
Mm-hmm.
This where the guy essentially wants to run to the end of time to kill himself, but then he meets this another guy who's been infected by the Speed Force, and he essentially wants to siphon all of the power from the time traveling crash test pilot, and essentially to give himself back life so he could take over the world. And then Flash ends up having to fight him, and then reversing some of the damage done. But yeah, so it's pretty interesting. At the end of the day, Flash wins, right?
Yeah, of course. But yeah, it's like the fight itself is such a small part of the story. It's 2 pages, I think, maybe 3 pages. But it's a good little story, and it's also really hard to find. I don't know if it's something that it's probably not regularly stocked at most comic book stores, because it was just like a prestige issue that got put out, like a one shot. But even on Amazon, I know you basically just have to find used copies.
Yeah, and it's not available digitally on Comixology or on PCs.
Yeah, they don't have it on any of their stuff.
And it's a shame too, because it really is such a great romp.
Yeah.
And I mean, with Seth Fisher's art, if you could look at it on a tablet, I'm sure it would just look amazing.
Oh yeah.
With it has really sharp coloring as well. I mean, the colors on it, off the top of my head, I don't know.
It's Chris Chuckry.
Chris Chuckry, yeah. It looks phenomenal.
Mm-hmm.
Because again, like to color Seth Fisher's artwork, it's a big ask of a colorist. And, Chris Chuckry does a great job.
Yeah, because Seth Fisher does not use a lot of heavy blacks in his inks and his line work. It's all very open.
It's all very open and the hyper detail.
Yeah, exactly. It's all very open, but there are still a lot of lines. Yeah.
So just flatting those, I'm sure took a long time.
Yeah, no doubt.
There are much easier gigs for some colors to work on.
Yeah, sure. So I know you kind of hinted at this earlier with what you were saying, but of like the big Seth Fisher books that he put out for Marvel and DC, the Batman book, the Green Lantern book, the Flash book, and the Fantastic Four Iron Man book, where does the Flash stand? Where does Time Flies stand among those 4?
Ooh, I might say 3.
Mm-hmm.
I really like Green Lantern World a lot.
Yeah.
I love J.M. DeMatteis and some of his like more philosophical work.
Sure, yeah.
It's it's just kind of Seth Fisher going balls to the wall on this.
It
With the
really
Green
is.
Lantern.
Yeah, it really is like even like we're talking how it's kind of a psychedelic book when in this book, but Will World is way over the top compared to this even.
Yeah, I mean, so if I was gonna rank him as far as like my favorite Seth Fisher artwork, I would say Green Lantern 1, Flash 2, Batman Legends of the Dark Knight 3. Then I really liked, well, like I said, Fantastic Four was fun. That and Vertigo Pop, they were just great books to look at. But as far as like overall story, like what's just the best read, I would say Green Lantern or Batman. Those are the two best. Again, I think Will World's a lot of fun. It's really great. It's got strong work from J.M. DeMatteis. And then the Batman Legends of the Dark Knight and Snow with Mr. Freeze is probably the second best Mr. Freeze story ever behind Batman the Animated Series.
Yeah.
Mr. Freeze.
I can agree to that. Yeah. We'll have to do an episode on Seth on those other books and maybe talk about them in more detail because they're all really good books in their own way. I might like Big in Japan, the Fantastic Four Iron Man book, maybe a little bit more than you do, but I can't say no to giant kaiju monsters.
Yeah, and that's what I mean. Like I said, it's great to look at.
Yeah,
and it's a lot of fun. As far as story wise, it's just
yeah,
it's just like, hey, let's get Seth Fisher doing a kaiju book with Iron Man and Fantastic Four, and it's amazing to look at. But as far as story wise, like I said, not a lot of story there. And so that's why I think these other three rank higher, in my opinion, than that one.
Yeah,
but
I can understand that.
Art wise, I subscribe to the entire catalog.
Haha, there you go. All right. Well, yeah, that was good. Like I started to say a minute ago, I don't know if I have anything else to say about this book. I don't know if you have any other final words that you might want to throw out there. But
no. Yeah. I think we said it all.
Yeah.
So I mean, everyone should pick a look if they can find it, and hopefully DC hears this podcast and puts it out digitally so people could buy it.
Well, I think I would appreciate a nice re-release of the Seth Fisher books, like nice oversized hardcover. Oh my goodness, what I would do for one of those.
Oh, that had all of his DC work.
Yeah.
Happy Dale.
Yeah.
Green Lantern World, Flash, and Vertigo Pop Tokyo, and then Batman Legends of the Dark Knight Snow. That
would be incredible. Because his art would look so, like if they put out like an absolute edition, because this art would just look so good at a bigger size,
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. And, it really is a tragedy because he died so early, and, you knew if he was around today, he'd be one of the biggest, I think he'd be one of the biggest artists working in comics today.
I think so, too. Yeah.
And it's just a shame that, unfortunately he passed away so young.
Yeah.
But it's our loss, and hopefully, DC and Marvel put all the stuff out in a nice collection that it deserves. So.
Well, hopefully, fingers crossed. But until then, I think we're just gonna have to settle for hunting down the old books and treasuring them forever.
For sure.
Well, all right, man. Let's do another episode sometime. Maybe about one of the other Seth Fisher books, or just about whatever.
I told you, man. Evan Dork.
Yeah.
Shannon Wheeler's Too Much Coffee, man.
That's right.
Those are two of my favorite books.
I forgot to mention how if you weren't insulted enough that I had Steve Higgins on the show before you were also very insulted that I did the Evan Dorkin book without you.
Yes.
So
I thought we were friends, but
I'm dropping the ball all over the place here.
I'm learning that we're not quite as friends as we thought. So
I don't get out enough to the Ink and Drink meetings because I think that obviously that's where things happen. That's where deals are made.
we're meeting now at Schlafly's Bottle Works in Maplewood.
Yeah.
Because Cicero's
I
closed,
saw that.
and so that was our home for the past 5 years actually.
Yeah.
Sad to see Cicero's close. We really loved having our meetings there, and loved that they gave us a space. But then Schlafly, they've been phenomenal, and we have an entire room that they have reserved for us. We do it the third Monday of the month. Every Monday of the month, with the exception of this December. I think we have to do it the first Monday of the month because of holiday parties and whatnot. But every day in 2008, third Monday of the month, we're at Schlafly Bottle Works in Maplewood. So if you're a cartoonist, writer, artist, you're looking for someone to collaborate, you're looking to write, someone to work with, or if you're a writer looking for an artist, or if you just want to meet and hang out and talk comic books with fellow creators, come on down. Yeah. We meet every day. You can check out our Facebook page or our website and have all the information there.
Right on. Well, Carlos, why don't you tell people where can they go to find your work online, or if they wanted to find more stuff from you?
So all of my books are available at the newly redesigned BrainCloud Comics store, our website. So if you just go to https www.braincloudcomics.com, you'll find all of my stuff, all the books that I'm in. You'll be able to find all the Ink and Drink graphic novels and our coloring book, and all the comics are available there as well. And so you'll have information on everything. It's all my work is right there on the BrainCloud website. You can also check out my Tumblr page. My Tumblr I have where I sort of blog about art and process. It's carlosgabrielruiz.tumblr.com. And so, like I said, I sort of blog about art and process stuff there. On Instagram, I have some of my artwork, but Tumblr and the BrainCloud Comics website are the best bet for finding my work online.
All right. Well, right on, man. We will leave it at that, but we will definitely be getting together to do another episode like this at some point. But until then, everybody out there listening, you can download episodes of this very podcast at comicdna.podbean.com, and you can also find us on YouTube, Comic DNA channel on YouTube. My name is Aaron Walther. I'm on Facebook and Twitter at AAWALTHER, AA Walther on Twitter. And you can find comics that I have written at www.thebirdlander.com and at www.newhavencomics.com. Thanks everybody for listening. We will see you all next time.